Okay, guys, perfect. We will get started. Thanks to everybody for signing up. Today's class will be a little bit different to the other ones we've been doing if you've been doing any of the live workouts. Today's is solely assessment based. So we're going to go through the TPI level 1 movement screen, which is a series of 16 exercises, and they're designed to basically help you figure out how your body is working in terms of mobility and coordination, specific to the demands you put on it in the golf swing. So we'll primarily be looking at range of motion and control in different hip, spine, and shoulder exercises, and also some more complex movements that put us through basically a variety of joints and movements, and seeing how well you can complete them. The first thing that I will get you to look at is just the scoring sheet, if you have it, just to make sure that everybody has a reasonably good idea of how that will work. So how we're going to use the sheet is, you'll see on the top left, the first exercise is pelvic tilt. The pelvic tilt box, so you have pelvic tilt and then a list of stuff below it. That's one assessment. And then to the right of that, you have pelvic rotation. That will be test 2. Then to the right of that, you'll have torso rotation. That will be test 3, and so on. So we'll only be dealing with one box at a time. We're going to start with the pelvic tilt. I'll explain the different elements of that test. I'll give you a chance to mark it, and then we'll move on to the next one. That should be pretty simple once we get going. The thing that I would advise most about the test, I won't talk too much, and we'll get started with the actual assessments, is don't worry too much going through it the first time now while you're watching me, about making sure that you mark yourself correctly and essentially trying to make sure that you can do the exercise perfectly. What I would say is make sure that you watch how I'm doing it and how I'm describing it very clearly. A lot of people watching these, they don't really take enough note of the details in the test, and they think they can do it, but they're not really doing what we're looking for. And I'll try and be as clear as possible with the explanations. So all you need for the first test, okay, is your 6-iron, and I'll show you what we're going to assess. The other thing to note on this, just before we get started, is there's always some measure of subjectivity in this. So if I tested you today, you got tested by somebody else tomorrow and somebody else the next day, they might give you a slightly different result on some of the different tests. So the main thing is just to get a gauge of roughly where you are. And also some of the tests are, say, pass, fail, but the range you can have between passing and failing can be huge. So you could have someone who is 5 degrees of range of motion away from passing, or you could have somebody who is 25 degrees of range of motion away from passing. They both might be registered as failing one of the tests, but obviously they're at a much different level. Okay, so if you grab your 6-iron for the first one, the very first thing that we're going to check, okay, and there's obviously a little bit of subjectivity in this, is we just want to look at your setup posture and get a rough idea of what it's like. I need to tilt this a little bit lower. So the main thing that we're looking for in your posture is primarily what sort of curvatures you have in your back, okay? So this will be the first marking on your pelvic tilt screen. What we're doing is setting up as if you were going to hit a golf ball, okay? And if you look at my spine, it's relatively what we call neutral, okay? There's 2 other options for postures that you can have. Number 1 is what's called C posture, and that's when you'd be very, very curved and rounded, particularly in your upper back this way, okay? And then the second one is what's called S posture, and that's more when your tailbone and your backside sticks out too much and you're too curved this way, okay? If you're able to see yourself in your screen or in your mirror, that's fine, okay? If you can't, a simple way that I get to check it when I can't see myself is set up in your standard posture, and then without changing it, so whatever feels just natural to you, you're going to get your club, you're going to run it along the length of your spine, and just use the back of your left hand to keep it in place, okay? And then what I would say from here is there's 2 things you can check, okay? If there's only a very small part of your mid-back on the golf shaft, that's going to be C posture if my back is too rounded. The other one, which would be S posture, would be, and this is more common, I think, if you have an excessive curve in your lower back, there'd be a huge space between my lower back and the shaft, and you probably feel a little bit of pressure on your lower back. That would be S posture. So what we're really looking for is, and these are all in a range, is that there should be a little bit of curve in your back. It doesn't have to be ramrod straight. It shouldn't be excessively curved into a C. And we don't want to have the opposite of that, which would be S posture, which is when your butt is really cranked out and the huge curve in your lower back, okay? So what we're gonna go on to now is how well you can control that. So this is what the first test is called, is pelvic tilt. So what we're gonna do for the pelvic tilt, you're gonna set up in golf posture. I'm gonna come a little bit closer here so you can see exactly what's happening, okay? What I want you to focus on is if you look at my belt line. So I'm only concerned with basically around my hips here, okay? What the test is from this start position, can I arch my lower back, which would be anterior pelvic tilt? And then can I do the opposite, round my lower back, which is posterior pelvic tilt? What I want you to look at as I'm doing this, okay? Look at the part of my body that's moving. All that you can see really moving is what's called my lumbar spine, which is from my tailbone to the lower part of my back here, my bottom 5 vertebrae, okay? I'm gonna go through about 5 or 6 reps of this, and what I want you to notice is there's no movement at my knees, there's no movement at my upper body or shoulders, I'm not standing taller or leaning over more, I'm just getting tilt one way at my pelvis, and then the other. So almost as if I had a bucket of water, tilt one way, tilt the other way. Okay? That's what I want you to try. What you might notice on this, okay, and this will help when we're scoring, what's common in this is you might have people, and when they go to round their lower back, they stand up this way, and then when they go to arch their lower back, they lean forward this way. Or you might have someone who's just stuck in position and they're not really sure exactly what they're doing, okay? The reason why we want to be good at pelvic tilt is if you look at good players, their setup posture like this is not the same as their posture when they're getting down towards the ball. They've been able to turn their tailbone underneath and flex their lower back a little bit and helps them rotate. People who can't pelvic tilt, they tend to stand up much more through the ball as opposed to rotate through the ball. So what we'll do now is just grab your sheet, okay? And if you look at the first section, so we have starting pelvic tilt. This was your setup posture with the 6-iron as if you were going to hit a shot. To the left, you can see there's 3 boxes that you can tick. So you can tick neutral tilt, if it was pretty close to what I was saying was neutral. You can tick S posture, if it was the one where you had your lower back cocked out and your chest stuck out. Or you can have C posture, which is the very rounded over or hunchback posture. Then if we look at the amount of motion below that, we have normal motion, hard time arching the back, hard time flattening the back, or both limited. So pick whatever you think is best. Again, you don't have to be extremely strict on this. It's more so to give you an idea of how your movement is. So you can pick the one there, and then the bottom one is quality of movement. So was your movement smooth? Did you have shake and bake? Shake and bake is when there's vibration at your lower back, when you're especially when you're tucking your tailbone underneath. It might have felt like it was rocking or shaking a lot, or else did not test would be that you couldn't move at all. Okay, we're now going to go on to test 2. Test 2 is a really important one for golfers. I'm going to put a stick in my belt loops here, an alignment stick, which will help for illustration purposes. You don't need to have one of these. Okay, so what pelvic rotation is going to do is look at our ability to separate lower body turn from upper body turn. If you've ever taken a lesson or watched golf on TV, separation is probably a term you've heard of, or sometimes it's called sequence. So what we want to try, okay, is we're going to set up in golf posture. And then what I want you to look at here is I have the 2 shafts on my body here. What I'm trying to do is I'm going to get my hips to turn, but you'll notice that my chest hasn't moved at all. So my pelvis is rotating, but my chest and shoulders are dead still. I'll show you from this view. So hips are rotating left and right, which you can see by the alignment rod that's in my belt. But you'll notice that my shoulders and chest haven't turned at all, or at least they shouldn't. So that's what we're checking. Can you get your hips to turn independent of your chest? We're not overly concerned with how far they turn, more so that you can get one to move without the other. Okay, so let's try that. So hips turning one way and then the other. Feet are staying flat on the floor, and there should be no movement at the shaft that's across your shoulders. You don't need a rod in your shorts. It's just useful for me so that you can see it more clearly. Okay, so you should have a decent idea here, okay? The next thing that we're going to try, okay, if you could not do that, if you felt like there's something going wrong there, I don't really feel like my hips are turning, or if you notice that you can't stop the upper body from moving, the next step on that is you're going to hinge over into golf posture. You're going to place the golf club on the ground in front of you and just press it into the floor with a little bit of pressure, nothing crazy. And then from here, you're going to try the same thing. So rotating right and left, you might find it's a lot easier when the upper body is locked into place with the golf club. Okay, so that's test 2, pelvic rotation. The reason why that one's really important, if you watch good players, mostly when they're playing, when they get, this is really for the transition of the swing. So when they get to the top of the backswing, they're able to get their hips to start the downswing first. What happens in some players that aren't quite as skilled, they get to the top of the backswing and then the upper body goes first. If the upper body goes first, this tends to happen. And then it's more of that over the top move. And we haven't got any separation or stretch across the midsection, which is important for power. If you grab your sheet, okay, your scoring sheet, we'll go through the second one. So pelvic rotation, where it says without holding shoulders, that's the first one we did. So when we were just in our first setup position. So what's different about this test is we have left and right. You can see that with the L and R. So what often happens on this is sometimes people are okay going in one direction and not okay going in the other direction. That's common if someone has an injury on one side, and you'll always see a difference between left and right-handed golfers. So if you felt like you were good or limited on one side or both sides, just mark it under the left and right. The holding shoulders section, okay, what that applies to is when we put the golf club into the ground. If I was assessing you in person, rather than putting the club in the ground, I might just put a hand on each of your shoulders to lock you in place. We did that by putting the golf club into the ground. It's the same idea. So if you improved when you put the golf club into the ground, you can just hit improve on right side or left side, or it doesn't improve. Nearly everybody improves. If it improves when you put the golf club into the ground, that usually shows that mobility is not the reason that you struggled, and it's more a coordination or control issue. Because putting the golf club into the ground for stability doesn't automatically make you more flexible, but it might make the coordination and the stability of the upper body easier. And then the last one, coordination, good rotary movement or more lateral movement. What that means is when we're set up in this position, you'll notice here that my hips are turning. What happens, some people, when they do this, is they have more this way, moving side to side instead of turning. Or a really common one, if I turn this way a little bit, is rather than turning, people drive their knee and hip back, which makes it look like their hips are turning, but they're really just extending their knee. So we want to make sure that it's a pelvis. So I'm going to look at my belt line, a pelvis rotation. Okay, test 3 is going to be torso rotation. And torso rotation is basically the opposite of what we just did. Okay, so I'm going to get golf club across my shoulders again. And what I'm looking for here is, can I turn? So again, I have the two rods, okay? This time, I want to keep the one on my pelvis dead still, and I want to see if I can rotate the one that's on my shoulders, okay? This is different to how you'd move in a golf swing. You wouldn't completely lock your hips into place like this. But what we're assessing is, do you have the ability to control whether you're moving just your pelvis, just your torso, which would be your upper body like I'm doing now, or are both of them always moving together? Do you find it really hard to decipher which is which? And that would signify a control issue. So that's all I want you to do. Be really strict on this one. Most people think they can do it, but then they notice that they're moving both sticks. So look at me here, do one or two. Notice how there's zero movement at my hips, and I'm just rotating. I feel like I'm just rotating from my shirt buttons and up. There's one point, it's not on the scoring sheet, but I just want you to make you aware of it for whenever you're doing this exercise or practicing it. When I turn, what you'll notice is that the club is on my shoulder plane. What we don't want to have happen, and you can try and monitor this yourself, is if I turn like this and the club is flat, that would be what's called a flat shoulder plane. We want my shoulders to be 90 degrees to my spine angle when I turn. So if I stand upright and just turn, the club should be flat or perpendicular to the ground. But if I hinge over into golf posture and then just turn, that should be on an incline, 90 degrees to my spine. So you want to make sure that you have that tilt going each way with your shoulders. The golf club should not be flat to the ground when you're turning your shoulders in golf posture. Okay, so if you look at your sheet for torso rotation, you have good or limited going to both sides. Most of the time, right-handed golfers find this easier going to the right, as in their backswing, and left-handed golfers find it easier going to the left for their backswing. Holding hips improves or doesn't improve. You can mark on, so if you did that and you found that you couldn't keep your hips still, then I would mark improves when your hips are held. Because what would have happened is if somebody put their hands on your hips would have stayed more solid and you just would have turned your shoulders. Most people don't have a problem with this test. Just before we move on to the fourth one, the overhead deep squat, I just want to give you a little bit of info on why we test those two exercises, the pelvic rotation and torso rotation. So obviously, I'm not a golf instructor, but from a basic movement standpoint, the reason why we want to test both of those is I'm a right-handed player. So when I'm doing the torso rotation test, so turning my upper body, that's more linked to my backswing. So in the backswing, we get separation from our upper body away from our lower body. Okay, so we want to be able to see, are we able to do that? What we don't want is not have any separation and both of them turn together, because that's just a spin and it'll be very hard to create any power. So that's more for the backswing. And then the first one we did, the pelvic rotation one, where you're trying to get the hips to turn, that's more so for your transition or downswing. So what happens there is once you get to the top of the backswing, you want to be able to get the hips to turn without the shoulders turning. And that's what allows you get that little bit of separation, drop inside and swing through, as opposed to the upper body going first and coming outside and across. Okay, the next one that we have is the overhead squat. This one is a little bit less golf specific in terms of it doesn't really look like the golf swing, but it gives us really good info about the ankle, hip, core, and shoulder, and also lets us see what your basic coordination and movement control is like. There's a few steps to this one. You'll notice if when you look at the scoring sheet in a second, and I'm going to bring you through each one, okay? So step one, you're going to get your feet about shoulder width apart. So I would say the outside of your shoulder in line with the middle of your feet. And you're going to have your feet lined up dead straight ahead, okay? So feet about shoulder width, pointed dead straight ahead. The next thing that we're going to do is I'm going to get the 6 iron on top of my head so that my two elbows are at 90 degrees. That allows us to make sure that we have the same grip width every time we do this test, okay? Once I have my 90-degree angle, then from here, I'm just gonna push the stick overhead. Okay, so this is our start position. Feet shoulder width, toes pointed straight ahead, elbows at 90 degrees, then push the stick overhead. The test from here is I'll do one first just to make sure if you have any injuries that you're comfortable doing it. I'm gonna try and keep my heels on the ground and squat down as low as I can. Okay, so heels down, squat as low as I can. That's criteria number one. Criteria number two is if I show you from the side, if you imagined a virtual line in front of my toes, I'll put one here with this stick. I have the shaft, say, over my ankles or my ears. I want to keep my heels down, but I also want to keep this shaft that's in my hands behind my toe line. I don't want to be out here, okay? So let's all just try first. Feet shoulder width apart, stick overhead, squat your butt down as low as you can, keeping your heels on the ground, and hold for a couple of seconds, okay? Then come back up to the top. The first thing that I want you to check, okay, after doing one rep, quickly look down at your feet. What most people notice straight away when they do this is I tell them have their feet straight ahead. I say make sure you have your feet straight ahead, and then they go like this. Or as they squat, there'll be one leg opening. That's usually a sign that there's a little bit of a limitation either in the ankle or the hip mobility, okay? So let's go feet straight ahead again. And I'm gonna show you from this view for this test. The pass on this test is, can I get my hips below my knees, and can I keep the shaft behind my toe line, the one that's in my hands? Okay, so for me, this would be a pass. If I was like this, that would not be a pass because my hips have got below my knees, but the shaft is in front of the toe line. Or this would also not be a pass because the shaft is behind my toe line, but my butt hasn't got lower than my knees, okay? That's usually pretty tough for most people. You can try another couple of those if you want to see what it's like and see if you can get it. So two things we're looking for. This shaft that's in my hands has to stay behind the shaft that's on the ground, okay? So that's one. If it was in front, that would be a fail. This is behind, that would be a pass. And then number two, if you look at my backside, it's lower than my knees, okay? If you cannot do that, which is a really tough test, okay? The next level of that test is the exact same setup posture, except we're just gonna put our hands out in front like this, okay? So hands out in front, and then from here, we're gonna see, can you squat your butt lower than your knees, keeping your heels flat on the ground, okay? Again, we're gonna be strict with the foot position, toes straight ahead, sit your butt down, lower than your knees, keep your feet straight ahead, okay? When you've that done, just take a look at your sheet, okay? And I'll guide you through the marking for this one. So we just did the overhead deep squat. You've three options in the first section. So for the standing squat, did you have the bar overhead deep squat? You only tick that option if you were able to do the first one that I showed you. So that was when you have the shaft above your head, you can get all the way down without it going in front of your toe line, okay? If you couldn't do that, don't mark it. Go down to the next one. Arms down, full deep squat. So that was when I gave you the second option of putting your hands out in front. Could you do this one, okay? Could you get your butt below your knees, keeping your heels flat on the ground? If you could do that one, that's the one you mark. Arms down, full deep squat, okay? Then we have a third option, and this is where this test gets a little bit more complex. Arms down, limited deep squat. So that would be if you took the shaft away from overhead, you put your hands out in front, but you still couldn't get your butt lower than your knees. Either you were leaning forward, you couldn't get your butt down, your heels had to come up off the ground. basically that you couldn't get into this position. Feet flat on the floor, hips below your knees, okay? If you can't do that, we'll all do it anyway. We get a third option, or sorry, we get a next level of the test, which is the half kneeling dorsiflexion test, which is going to look at our ankle mobility. I'll explain why we're looking at our ankle mobility after we have it done. So for the ankle mobility test, you're going to get in a half kneeling position, okay? You'll notice my legs are at 90 degrees. I'm going to be testing the ankle mobility on my forward leg, okay? How I'm going to do that is I'm going to get one palm. I'm going to put my hand down in line with my toe, okay? I'll get the club out of the way. And then what I'm going to do is put the grip of the club just past my hand. The reason we do that is that gives me roughly about 4 or 5 inches between my big toe and the shaft, okay? What I want you to make sure of then is you're not pulling the shaft back towards you, that it stays vertical. I'm going to keep my chest upright, and then my front knee, I'm going to push it as far forward as I can, keeping my heel on the ground. And what I'm trying to see is, can I get my knee to touch the shaft without dragging the shaft back towards me? Another way you can do this, if you're near a wall, it's also pretty easy, is just get yourself about 4 inches from the wall, put your hands down to mark the distance, and then see if your knee can get to the wall. Same idea as the shaft. Okay, so try that on both sides, right and left. So we're looking at the dorsiflexion, ankle mobility on the front leg. It's also important on this one, make sure that when you set up, you have the toe pointed dead straight ahead. You're not after spinning open with the foot, okay? So here, set up the shaft, and then push forward. Okay, so if you want to look at your sheet again quickly, and we'll finish up with this one. So we have the half kneeling ankle test. Did you have good dorsiflexion bilaterally? That's if you were able to get your knee to touch the shaft with both legs. Or else you might have been limited right, limited left, or both limited, okay? So that's pretty straightforward. Did you weight shift? That's a tough one for you to pick up yourself. What I'll get you to do is one more. And what you should try and notice on this, if you have a mirror that you can watch yourself, or if you have another device set up with selfie mode, the way to watch that is basically as you're squatting, you notice that your hips are moving to one side. The reason why this might happen is that if I had, say, an injury on my right knee, there's a good chance that as I'm going into this position, I'm going to try and favor the other side so that I'm not putting stress on it, okay? And you can mark, did your weight shift to your right side or your left side? So just real quick on that, the overhead squat test, TPI will tell us early extension, which is in the golf swing. As you come down towards the ball, your hips going towards the ball and you standing up through impact. I don't believe that you need to have that much range of motion in a deep squat to stop you going towards the ball when you swing, okay? What I think the overhead squat is better for is giving us a reasonable idea of how good your squatting proficiency is, which is going to be more important for designing training programs. So for example, the type of squat you'd work with in the gym, okay? The reason why the overhead one is so much harder and why if you fail it, we check the ankle mobility is that in the overhead one, if I put my hands overhead, okay, as I squat down, if you watch how far forward my knees go to be able to pass this test, that's quite a lot of what that ankle dorsiflexion test was, okay? If I can't get that knee to go forward, what's going to happen is I have to push my butt back more and allow my torso incline forward more to get my hips below my knees. And then if you look where my hands are, they're going to be in front of that toe line, okay? That's not as difficult when I put the hands out in front. It's much easier. So oftentimes, if You can pass the test with your hands out in front, but not overhead. The mobility in the ankle can be the reason for it. I don't think we need to get as much ankle range of motion needed to pass the test that we do to avoid early extension, but it's just a good gauge and something to look at your limitation in. There's also a potential that it's a shoulder limitation or a core control limitation. If you really struggled with the pelvic tilt, so if you had no control over this, people often find the overhead part harder because the only way they can get their arms overhead is by arching and extending more, and then it's impossible to squat from here. So one, the corrections for this. Ooh. Sorry, someone just, my fault. Sorry, we should be good now. So the reasons why you might have a problem with that are, one, if you can't control the pelvic tilt, if you have to arch your lower back to get your hands overhead, then you'll struggle with the squat. Number two, if your ankle can't go forward this way, if you've no dorsiflexion, you'll probably find that you have to go this way in your squat. You notice my knees haven't traveled forward. And then the third one, which we'll find out about later, is if you're very limited in shoulder flexion, that's going to make it very hard to keep your arms over your head as well, okay? So there's a lot in that test, and a couple of the other tests in this assessment link back to that. I'll fill you in on that as we go through them. The next one that we're going to do is a toe touch test, and this looks at our ability to hip hinge. Most people think of a toe touch test as a hamstring, so back of the thigh flexibility test, which isn't really true. It's more so a test of how well we can use our hips and how well we can flex our spine. So for the test, you're going to get your feet about shoulder width, your toes pointed dead straight ahead, okay? Then from here, you're going to get one hand over the other. Real simple for this, okay? Your legs must stay straight. And then all we're going to try and do from here is hinge over and touch your toes, okay? You can try 2 or 3 of them. The reason why we want to see somebody's toe touch range of motion is a lot of it is related to the setup posture that we talked about earlier, and also the ability to maintain that through the swing. So if you think of that toe touch where you're trying to push your butt back and hinge over, see how much flexibility we have here. That range of motion isn't particularly that different to what we do when we set up in the swing, okay? And then trying to maintain that posture as we rotate through the swing. What's often seen with people who struggle with the hip hinge, this one, is that because they're not comfortable in that range of motion, they set up either with the S posture like this, because they're not comfortable hinging over at their hips, or what else is seen is they stay upright and they go too much with their knees forward. So that's when teaching somebody how to hinge at their hips and go over is useful. If you struggled with that test, I want everybody to do it once more, okay? What happens a lot of times with this, when people find it difficult, if anyone watching was only able to say get to just below their knees, is they do this type of movement. And they get stuck about here, okay? The reason they get stuck is they've only used their mid and upper back to try and hinge over. They haven't got their hips pushing back and their upper body hinging forward. So the first key on this, imagine there's a wall about 2 feet behind your hips. Push your butt back, hinge over, and then reach back towards your ankles, okay? Just before we do the testing on this, there is a second element, okay? So if you were able to pass the toe touch that we just did, this will probably be easy, but if you weren't, you want to try and find out, is there a difference between your right side and left side, and is one of them causing more of an issue, which can be common depending on injuries in sporting and training backgrounds. So how we'll test that is I'm going to get one foot and I'm going to elevate it just up onto the ball of the foot so that the heel is off the ground and this knee is bent. That's going to take the stress off my right leg and just test my left side. Okay, and then if you're doing the other side, one down, the other up onto the toe, and test the other side. Okay, and again, making sure the leg stays straight. So if you grab your testing sheet, we just did the toe touch. Bilateral is the first one we did with 2 legs. So you can either mark you can or you can't with a tick or a circle. And then the unilateral toe touch, we're both limited, or could you only touch left side or right side? If both were limited, just tick the yes or circle it. If one side was limited, you can just mark the left or right. We're moving on to the upper body now. And this test is called the 90-90 test, which looks at external shoulder rotation. So how we're going to start this test is get your elbow up to the same height as your shoulder, okay? So hand by my side, I'm going to bring my arm out and then bend, just so everybody can see the setup, okay? Arm out to the side so it's at shoulder height, and then bend at my elbow. Well, I'm going to stay upright, so not in golf posture. And then from here, what I want to do is rotate my forearm towards the ceiling as high as I can. No rotation, no pulling back at your elbow. Once I have this start position, from my shoulder to my elbow is just like a rotary, and I'm going to see if I can get, I'm going to see how far back I can get this, okay? What we're looking for in this is my forearm. Can I get it greater than my spine angle? So for example, can I get it further than vertical, all right? What a lot of people do in this to cheat is they start going this way, and then they lean back with their chest to make it look like that their arm has gotten back further. But in reality, their forearm is still just parallel with their spine angle. So if you're wearing a t-shirt that has a seam in it, if you can see it or just note it, that the seam in your t-shirt and the forearm angle are what you're looking for, okay? So let's try a couple of those. A way that I like to do it too is get somebody to put their hand just where their rib cage meets their abdominals. And if you keep your hand there as you're rotating your forearm, if you try and cheat by arching your chest forward this way, you'll feel it, okay? So let's try this. Elbow to the same height as your shoulder and rotate. So this is one out of all of the tests that I really struggle with, the external rotation on my right shoulder. Okay. So what I want you to just note for a second, don't write it down yet, okay, is this is our right arm, standing posture. There's 3 ways that this could be, okay? You could have less than 90 degrees, equal to 90 degrees, or greater than 90 degrees, which I struggle to demonstrate here, okay? So just note what you had there. Now we're gonna hinge over into golf posture, like you were hitting that 6-iron we set up with a second ago, and you're gonna do the same thing. So arm to shoulder height, flex your elbow, and now keeping my golf posture, I'm gonna try and do that same rotation, okay? What we want to see here is relative to standing upright, is it the same as, less than, or greater than? I'm definitely a little bit less than. I find this harder, which most people do, because when we hinge over, we now must deal with a stability and strength element. When we're standing upright, it's mainly just mobility. When I hinge over, if I lose positioning of my shoulder blades, so if I round forward a little bit, I'll probably find this much harder. Go to your sheet very quickly so that we don't have to remember too much. If you look at your 90-90, okay, just go to the, well, I did the right side. If you did the right side, go to just the right-hand side of this marking sheet, okay? We have standing, was it greater than spine angle, equal to spine angle, or less than spine angle? Mine was equal to, so I'm gonna mark roughly, so I'm gonna mark that middle box. Then I go down to golf posture, staying on the right-hand side. Was it equal to my standing posture? less than my standing posture, or greater than my standing posture? I would say 99% of the people who do this will be answering either equal to standing or less than standing. Probably less than standing. That's what happens nearly all the time, okay? It's very unlikely it's greater than standing. So that's the right side. We're now gonna repeat that with the other side, okay? So you're gonna get up nice and tall. You're gonna get your elbow to the same, so hand to the same height as your shoulder. Flex your elbow to 90 degrees. And then you're going to try and rotate as far as you can. And if you're watching me doing these, you can see straight away there's probably a 10-degree difference, which is why it's good to do both sides in all these things, okay? So just to set up to make sure everybody knows, arm out to the side, flex to 90 degrees. That's going to be your start position. And then I'm just rotating, okay? But you're going to have to monitor yourself looking from this view. So does my forearm get less than, equal to, or greater than my spine angle? So I'm definitely greater than on this side. That established, we're then going to do the same thing where we hinge over into golf posture, okay? Arm's going to go out to the side, flex your elbow to 90 degrees, and then from here, we're going to rotate as much as we can. So I would say on this one, I'm probably less than I was standing. It's still better than my right side, but it's less than when I was standing upright. You can see how far my forearm goes past my head. When I go this way, forearm's pretty much in line with my ear, okay? So go to your sheet. We're on the left side of 90-90. You have your standing posture, greater than, equal to, or less than. And then you have your golf posture. Was it equal to, standing? Sorry, was it equal to standing, less than standing, or greater than? Mine was less than. Okay, so 2 questions that people always ask on this test. Why do we do it standing upright and in golf posture? And how does this relate to my golf swing? Number 1, the reason we do it standing upright and in golf posture. When I'm standing upright, there's very little strength or stability demand on my shoulder blade, my scapula. So when I go like this, pretty much all I'm assessing is mobility, okay? How well I can move through a range of motion. So I'm seeing, is the range of motion in my shoulder there, okay? When I hinge over into golf posture, now there is a strength or stability demand on my shoulder blades because of gravity. For example, to make that exaggerated, if I went here, this would be much harder again, okay? If I see a huge difference between golf posture when I'm on a little bit of an incline and standing when I'm this way, that proves that mobility is not the issue in my right shoulder. Because when I lose mobility from standing to hinging over 15 degrees, my flexibility in my shoulder hasn't suddenly got worse. But I have an issue with strength and stability in this right shoulder blade, which I'm not surprised with. I broke my right collarbone pretty badly, okay? So that's why we do that. If you can pass it easily, standing, we've proven the mobility is there. If you hinge over and now you lose 10 or 15 degrees, you have a strength or stability issue in that right shoulder, or whichever shoulder it is, okay? The second question, how does this relate to my golf swing? This is something that's really popular in instruction at the moment. If you follow anything online, everybody talks about shaft pitch or shallowing the shaft in transition, okay? I'm going to show you how your trail shoulder, most people watching this will be right-handed, so that's your right shoulder, and how your range of motion in that shoulder interacts with what happens to shaft, okay? So if we take, again, this position, so this is external rotation, okay? If I don't have much ability to rotate this shoulder, what's going to happen is 2 things, all right? This, as I come back, if I can't rotate that shoulder, I'm going to have my elbow more in this position, and look at how vertical the shaft is. If my shoulder's able to do this as I'm coming back, then the shaft gets more into that type of position, okay? That's not really that important. You'll see really good players from both of those positions. And again, I'm not a golf instructor. What's more important is from here on the way down. If I'm coming down and my shoulder can't go this way at all, and it's forced to stay internally rotated this way, that's going to have a very steep shaft and make the ball very hard to hit. If I can go with my right arm like this, if I can get it to open up this way, well, what that gives you a chance to do is get the shaft more this way on the way down, which is much easier to hit the ball. So if your right shoulder is very limited, you may have a very, very steep shaft in your downswing or your backswing. And if you can't get it to flatten out at all, it's very hard to hit the ball well. If you struggle with your lead shoulder, so as a right-handed player, if it's your left arm, if you can't rotate that way on the way through, so this way, what you tend to have happen is chicken wing. So your left arm can't fold over. You'll be stuck this way on the way through. Okay, so that's trail side is more about the shaft pitch on the way down. You don't want it too vertical. And then on the lead side on the way through can be related to a big chicken wing. Now, again, people have played golf really well with all of those things. So that's why these would be called swing tendencies rather than swing flaws. So you've your left side marked. Next one, we're on to single leg balance, okay? Single leg balance is simple in theory, but not that easy, okay? The reason we do this is to see what sort of control you have from the feedback in your feet, okay? So how good are your feet at responding to where your body is in space based on how your weight is shifting, okay? Which is important for the golf swing. What you're gonna do is, and anybody who's been doing the live classes will recognize this, you're gonna have your feet together, stand up nice and tall. You can take as long as you want to get your balance set by focusing your eyes on something in front of you. You're gonna pick one leg off the ground. There's a couple of rules on this, okay? My hands must stay by my side, my foot must stay in one position, and I can't have huge amounts of body lean, okay? Pick out something in the distance. Once you feel like you have your balance under control, you're gonna close your eyes, okay? Once you feel like you have your balance under control and you close your eyes, I want you to slowly start counting in seconds, okay? So I'm gonna put a Mississippi between my second counts to make sure it's slow enough count. Ready? So I'm gonna close my eyes. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, 8 Mississippi, 9 Mississippi, 10 Mississippi. Keep going, okay, as long as you can. If you lose your balance, take a break, get your breath back, and do the same thing on the same leg, okay? Feet together, hands by your sides. If you're unsteady on your balance and you're worried, put your hand next to something if you're worried about falling so that you can grab your balance if you need to. Okay, so you get 3 attempts on your right leg, then 3 attempts on your left leg. So get your balance first with your eyes open. Once you feel like you have your balance set, close your eyes and then count. 1 Mississippi, I didn't do too well that time. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4 Mississippi, 5 Mississippi, 6 Mississippi, 7 Mississippi, etc. Okay, so you get 3 attempts on your right side and then your left side. Take your time doing this. Want to make sure that everybody gets 3 tries on both sides. And obviously just try and remember what your best score is on each leg. Okay, so if you have that done, Just go to the single leg balance scoring sheet. You have your left side. Really important on this, okay? Your left side is when your left foot was your standing leg. So the left side is when you're standing on your left leg. So you have your options here, 0 to 5 seconds, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, and so on. So pick whichever one was your best result. So if you did 3 attempts and you got 5 seconds, 7 seconds, 19 seconds, you'd tick the 16 to 20 second box, okay? And the same on your right side. The next one that we're going to do is a lat length test. This one is, I'm going to show you from 2 views, okay? I might need to move my camera so that you can see it properly from both angles. But what I want you to do is get yourself against the wall. I'll show you this now. And if you need to move away from your device to go to a wall, that's fine. So I'm going to show you from 2 views. I'm going to have my feet about a foot from the wall. And then I'm going to be in a tiny squat position, just a little bit of flex in my knees. I have all of my back, my tailbone, my mid back, my upper back against the wall. I'm going to get my hands to the same height as my shoulders with my thumbs pointed up. And then I'm going to see if I can get my hands or my fingers, my thumbs to touch the wall, keeping my elbows locked. So arms locked. Can I get my thumbs to touch the wall? I'm going to show you from the side view, and there's a couple of things that are important in this. So I'm going to squat down a little bit deeper just so you can see me clearly here, okay? When I have my hands out in front, you'll notice that first of all, I have my tailbone all the way to the back of my head against the wall. If your head comes off the wall, that's fine. I don't want you to extend your neck back. The second thing is, and this will go back to the pelvic tilt exercise we did a while ago, my lower back is flat against the wall. I can't fit my fingers beneath my spine. It's flat and firm to the wall. As I go overhead, my lower back remains flat against the wall. There's no space there. What some of you will notice for sure is as your arms go overhead, you will arch your lower back off the wall so that now there's a big space. That goes back to the pelvic tilt test we did first, whereas if you struggle to control the position of your pelvis, which would be core stability or core control, you will arch this way. The second thing is, imagine from your shoulder to your wrist is an iron bar. These elbows cannot flex, okay? So lower back glued to the wall, arms overhead. Let's try that, okay? And see how you do. As you're doing this, okay, just take a note, look to each side as you go through it. And what we will check is as you go overhead, sometimes someone will have one arm hit the wall, no problem. Other arm struggles a little bit more. So try and gauge. It can be hard to do, but just roughly, if both thumbs are the same distance from the wall. If you get your marking sheet, you have left and right. Your options here are below the nose. So that would be if I raise my arms and they don't get past my nose, that would be below the nose. Covers the nose is as I go here, when I look side on, this would be my arms covering my nose. And then we have between the nose and the wall, which would be past my nose, but not all the way to vertical. And then I would have thumbs touch the wall, okay? So you can mark there. Why do I need to be able to raise my arms overhead in the golf swing? If we think of this position where I'm trying to raise, this is primarily important for right-handed golfers, their left arm, okay? So if I just stand upright and I raise my arm overhead, okay? That looks nothing like a golf swing. If I raise my arm overhead and face you this way, And now I hinge over into golf posture here, okay? And now if I rotate into a backswing, now that looks like a lot like a golf swing, okay? If I'm limited in this left lat or this left shoulder joint, what I'm gonna have a really hard time with is getting this left arm to get any type of height in the backswing here, okay? And if I struggle to get that arm moving in the backswing here, what people often do is as they're coming back, we'll all try and generate speed from somewhere so we have enough power to hit the ball, is they might just go, oh man, that shoulder is limited, but I need to create more power here. Stand up, lose your posture, and then it's very hard to come back down to the ball in the right spot. The other thing that people can do is if I show you from this view, again, if that's limited and I can't get back as far as I'd like to, people end up leaning into their left side, so reverse spine tilt to help them get their left arm higher, and then that often leads to hanging back too far on the right side on the way down. Okay, so left shoulder, particularly the lat, shoulder joint, that flexion motion of raising the arm overhead. Looks like nothing here, but then if I hinge over into golf posture and just rotate, all of a sudden it's very, very specific to what you want in the golf swing. So you can mark those guys off. Okay, the next two tests that we have are extremely specific to the golf swing. So you'll probably enjoy going through these. Once we have those two done, the next four we can get through extremely quickly, okay? The next one we do is the one that people mess the setup up on the most. So clearly watch how I do this and then set it up yourself. This is the one where you need your 3 golf clubs. Get 1 golf club. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it's not the 6-iron, okay? So I have a 4-iron. I'm gonna put that on the ground so that it's parallel. You know what, I'm gonna pull this. I'm gonna give you a better view of this to make sure everyone can see it clearly. Okay, so get one golf club parallel to the camera screen, okay? Then I want you to get your 6-iron. You're gonna get the 6-iron so that you have the grooves on the floor, and then slide the club forward so that the sole of the club from the heel to the toe is resting along the golf club. Okay, can everyone see that? So 4-iron parallel to the camera screen, and then the sole of the 6-iron is resting against it, okay? What I'm gonna do from here, sorry, I'm just gonna put that up a little bit. Okay, then from here, what I want you to do is just stand on one foot. I'm gonna stand on my right foot and point my toe dead straight ahead. I'm gonna get the left foot up onto the ball of the foot. And there's only about 5% of weight on this. About 95% of my weight is on my standing leg. I'm gonna get the shaft, the spare one again, it doesn't matter what this is. And I'm gonna put it just below my belt line. I'm gonna bring my hands in right in front of my 2 thighs, with my hands open, and press it against my hips, okay? What I'm gonna do from here, and this is where it gets you must be really strict on yourself. Keeping your hands glued tight to your hips and your right foot, so your standing foot, glued to the floor, you're gonna rotate as far as you can to the right, okay? When I've rotated as far as I can to the right, I want you to look down and see if that the shaft that's across your hips has gotten to less than, parallel with, or greater than the shaft that's on the ground, okay? So you're gonna turn as far as you can, and then you're trying to see, is it less than, equal to, or greater than the shaft that's on the ground? Just a quick tip on this. A lot of people, as they're turning, they pull with their right hand and the other arm comes off, and it's after losing their hips. So it must stay directly against your pelvic bone, okay? So right foot up nice and tall, glute tight to your hips, rotate as far as you can. And then we're trying to make sure your big toe, so
must stay on the ground, and then you're checking to see if you're less than, equal to, or greater than. Okay, what I want you to do from there is go to your sheet, because this gets confusing quickly, okay? Go to your sheet and look at lower quarter rotation, backswing, and the right side, okay? If you were parallel with the shaft, that's 60 degrees. That's why we use the 6-iron. The lie angle is 60 degrees. So you might have been equal to, so 60 degrees or more, or less than on the right side. Okay, mark off. Now what I want you to do is go back to the same setup position. So exact same thing. This time, you're going to go on your left foot. You're going to put the shaft across your hips, and then you're going to rotate to your right, okay? Same direction, but we're standing on the left foot rather than the right foot, okay? And let's see how that goes. Most people find this a little bit easier, okay? This is called the lower quarter rotation test. And then go to your sheet and mark off. So this is important, okay? If you're a right-handed player, turning to your right, like we just did, is the backswing on your scoring sheet. But if you're a left-handed player, this is actually your downswing, okay? So that's on the sheet. So if you're left-handed, just watch out for that. Next, what I want you to do is get your golf club. You're going to flip it over so that the grooves are pointed up towards the sky. Rest the club on the ground and then slide it forward so that it hits the shaft. And now what you will see is I have the exact same setup, but the 60-degree lie angle is going the other way, okay? Then we're going to stand on our left foot first, pointed dead straight ahead at the camera screen. You're going to get the other leg up onto the ball of the foot. Same thing with the shaft, in nice and tight. Glue it to our hips. And then from here, we're going to rotate as far as we can to the left, okay? What we're trying to see here, again, is that shaft that's on our hips. Is it less than, equal to, or greater than the shaft that's on the ground? And also watching what's going on with that left foot. We don't want it rolling open, and we want it staying firm to the ground. This is a pretty difficult test, okay? But it's looking at lower body rotation. Once you have the left side done, you can do your right side. Foot pointed straight ahead, left foot up onto the ball of the foot, shaft glued just below your belt line, hands are in close and they're open. I'm not gripping the shaft because that makes it be knocked off. I'm pressing it tight to my tailbone and I'm rotating. Okay, so left and right foot turning to the left, okay? Then go to your sheet and just mark off what you have there. Grab your golf clubs, but don't put them too far away. You're going to need them again for the next test. What you also need is your kitchen chair, okay? So grab your chair and then I'll show you how to set this up. Okay. Rather than having the chair pointed dead straight ahead at the camera screen, what I want you to do is rotate it so that one of the corners of the chair or the leg is pointed straight at the screen, okay? Then it does not matter what clubs you use at all. You don't need, you just need shafts. I'm going to get one of them. I'm going to go to the side of the chair and I'm going to put the shaft so that it's on the outside leg of the chair and cuts across in the front, and make the shaft as long as possible going past the front leg of the chair. So don't have it back here, slide it as far past as you can. Then I'm going to go to the other side and I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm going to go to the side of the chair and then I'm going to put it on the ground, join it to the front one, and you'll notice there's an X at the front of my chair, okay? Once you've that made, grab your spare shaft. So now when I'm sitting, I'm directly in the middle of that X. I'm on the V shape on the ground here. I'm on the very corner of the chair. I have a 45-degree shaft in each direction. You're going to get the spare shaft, put it above your collarbones, so not down across your chest, right on the bottom of your throat, cross one hand over. And what I want you to make sure of is that it's not down on your shoulders, because shoulders can be used to cheat this. It's above your shoulders on your throat, okay? I'm going to slide the shaft as far as I can so it's over my left shoulder. And then from here, I'm going to rotate as far as I can to my right. I'm going to keep my ankles and knees together. Once I've rotated as far as I can, I'm going to glance to my left and I'm going to see if this shaft on my shoulders is less than, equal to, or greater than the shaft that's on the ground, okay? So just note that. Up tall, turn to the right, it might be less than, it might be equal to, or it might be greater than, okay? That's right side, or backswing for right-handers. Now I'm going to do the opposite. So I'm going to stand up nice and tall. I'm going to rotate as far as I can to the left, and I'm going to glance to see where that is relative to the shafts, and that's your left side, okay? When you have that done, you can put your clubs and chair away. You don't need them for any of the rest of the tests. And mark your sheet. So that was seated trunk rotation. We have greater than 45 degrees, equal to 45 degrees, or less than 45 degrees on left and right sides. Before we move on, I just want to do a really quick run through of why those tests are so important. Sorry, now I'm moving the camera to get better views for the different tests. Okay, so when we were doing the lower quarter rotation test, turning and turning, okay? Where that's particularly important for is this test where we have the right foot down, right-handed player, and they're turning to the right. That's really similar to what we want to be able to do in the backswing, to turn in, okay? If you're really limited in that, what tends to happen is that people either sway, they go this way because they can't turn, or because they can't load into this hip, they stand up or they sway, both of them, okay? Then on the left side, on the downswing, and this is what I would say is nearly more important or more common, is a struggle to turn this way into your left hip. That's where the downswing, you want to be able to try to clear and turn into that hip. If you struggle with that, what's more than likely going to happen is either you slide this way because you can't turn. If that's from this view, it can look either like too much slide here, or your hips go towards the ball. So if you see someone and they really struggle with that rotation and you see their swing, they're never going to be someone who can clear those hips open a lot. They're going to have to do something else in their swing or improve their hip mobility. And then for the torso rotation, one where we're sitting and turning our shoulders, that's usually pretty clear for people to understand. In your backswing, if you can't turn your shoulders, you're going to be limited with how far you can rotate your chest and torso back. That's going to be a problem for power. If you struggle to turn through your downswing, well, then you're going to have a hard time getting your chest to rotate through the ball. Oftentimes what that looks like is people lacking rotation and often coming up early, their hands and body going out to the right, trying to save the ball, or trying to save the face of the club with their hands, as opposed to someone who has good rotation, being able to turn all the way through and use their hips and chest to square up the face a little bit. Okay, the next one is the glute test. So this looks at how well you can contract and control your glutes, turn the muscles in your butt cheeks, and see what your strength is like there. We're nearly there. We probably have about 5 minutes left. So you're going to lie on your back. You're going to get your feet flat on the floor. Pull your heels close to your butt. You're going to get your hands together, point them up towards the sky, okay? Then from here, I'm going to bridge my hips up as high as possible so that I have at least a straight line from my knees through my hips and my shoulders. Then from here, I'm going to extend one knee, but keep my thighs parallel. So I extended my left leg. From this position, what I'm going to try and do is hold for 15 seconds. Before you start, there's a couple of things that I want you to take note of, okay? Number one is that the height of my hips in this position need to stay the same height when I let this leg go out in front. I can't allow myself drop down. I'm testing my right glute. What a lot of people do is they allow their right leg go down, lift their left leg up higher, and they think they're doing great. We want thighs to stay parallel, both hips to stay up, and then just in front, okay? We also don't want any rotating side to side. So can your hips stay square? And can you keep that butt cheek up? Ready? We're gonna go for 15 seconds. Okay, and down. Well done. Take a break for a second. If anybody cramped up in their right hamstring when they were doing that, just be careful. I'm going to show you left side now. And it might happen on this side too, so watch out. Feet flat on the floor, hands together, bridge up. And this time I'm going to extend my right leg, keep the top, keep the hips level, and hold for 15. And down. Okay, if you want to grab your sheet for that one. So glute normal on right and left for that would be able to hold 15 seconds without any huge difficulty and definitely no cramping, okay? You also want to have felt it primarily in the glute. If you found that you were feeling that exercise more in your hamstring on the side that was down or in your lower back, that's not normal glute, okay? That is weak glute because you're using your hamstring and your lower back to do the exercise. So to tick glute normal on each side, and it might be different right and left, you need to have been able to hold it for 15 seconds, primarily feel it in your butt cheek on the side that had the foot on the ground, and that's it. Glute weak would be you were able to hold it for 15 seconds, but it was a struggle, and you felt it mainly in your hamstring and lower back. And cramping is what happens sometimes when that position is very unusual for people. They can't use their butt cheek at all, so all the stress goes to their hamstring, and the hamstring cramps in response. The reason why we check the glute is that it's very multifactorial in that your glutes are really, really important for power in rotating your hips. And if you struggle with them, it's very likely that you're also going to be someone who struggles with a lot of the other tests, like the excessive S posture in your start position and with the early extension. If you can't use your glutes well, or if you're not really sure what they're doing and you're putting more stress into the hamstrings, more stress into the lower back, it's going to be a problem for power production, and you're probably going to have a little bit of lower back discomfort or potentially lower back discomfort compared to someone who's using their glutes well. The reason we do it with that test is when you're on your back and you have your knee flexed and you extend your hip, you're in a position where the glutes should be dominant based on anatomy and mechanics. That should be primarily a glute movement. If you're not feeling your glute and you're feeling your hamstrings and your lower back, you've got some work to do to learn how to use those glutes. Couple left. These ones don't take quite as long. We have 5 tests, but they're reasonably slow, or they're reasonably quick to get through. So the cervical rotation is up nice and tall, hands by your sides. The key on this is no movement at the shoulders or chest. You're going to rotate. You also must keep your mouth closed. Rotate as far as you can with just your head in one direction, no movement at the chest. Keeping your mouth closed, what I want you to do is put one finger just on your collarbone, okay, your clavicle. And then from here, what I want you to see is, can you get your chin to touch that finger? Okay, so turn, no movement at the chest, no hiking up of the shoulder, just rotate your head and neck, and then get your chin to touch your shoulder, okay? So that is to the right. I'm going to do to the left. Rotate, mouth stays closed. Touch your neck to your shoulder. That's right and left, okay? You can grab your sheet. This is simple. You either touch on both sides or one or both sides is limited. When you put your finger in the middle of your collarbone, if you can get your chin to touch it, keep your mouth closed, that's not limited. That's clear. You're able to do it. Why are we concerned with neck rotation? In the golf swing, even though the head doesn't tend to rotate that much on the backswing, as I turn my shoulders this way, that's basically the same thing as me doing this with my neck. So my shoulders turning to the right is putting the same stretch on my neck as when I turn my neck to the left. If I'm very limited in neck rotation and I'm trying to turn my chest, it might stop me from rotating because there's too much stress up here. So if you found that this and this were very hard, that could be a reason why you struggle to get your upper body to turn in the backswing, or on the downswing, you can't allow yourself turn all the way through. Your neck is restricting the upper body from moving. So definitely want to get that neck rotation clear. I'm going to show you the next one for my knees because I want to get close to the camera. This is forearm supination. You're going to start with your elbows in by your sides and your thumbs pointed up. And I'm going to be going in two directions. So I'm going to open or supinate my forearms as much as I can. Make sure that they stay by your sides. What we're looking for here is being able to get to 80 degrees. 90 degrees would be my two thumbs parallel with the ground. So I'm at 90 degrees here, which is 10 degrees more than 80. If you're at, say, this might be 45, this might be about 60 or something, and then this would be 90. We're trying to get to 80, which would be roughly about here. We're also going to do the opposite. So we're going to try and pronate or turn my palms in as much as I can. And this is where things change for me. So rotate in, and that's definitely more of a struggle for me. I can't quite get to 80 with either side. So this way is supination, and then rolling in is pronation. All right, mark that off on your sheet. So that is forearm rotation. You could have greater than 80 degrees bilaterally left on right on each of them, or you could have limited palm up or palm down on left or right. So if you need to take a second to work out what that was, you can do so. The next one is wrist hinge. This test doesn't have a certain amount of movement we're looking for. It's more a case of, can we do it or can we not do it? What it looks like is you're going to be from the side, and what you're trying to see is, can both wrists hinge down and can both wrists hinge up? That sounds simple, okay? But what I want you to do, or note here as well, is if I put my hands in front and if I get square with the camera, if all I do is hinge down and hinge up, there should be no change of how much of my fingers or palm you can see. It should just be a vertical hinge down and up. What often happens with people on this, when they say, oh yeah, that's no problem, I can do this, it's easy. But what they're really doing is actually flexing and extending this way rather than vertically, rather than vertical down and up. Does that make sense? So what you want to do when you're doing it is see if it's just vertical or if you have some sideways motion going on as well, all right? So let's try that. I'll show you from this way. So I just want to see that vertical hinge down and up. If you're not sure, put your fingers out in front and check that it's just vertical and there's no flexing or extending. And again, there's no amount we're looking for, just can you do it or not? And then for the last two, we're going to grab your 6-iron. I have a stool here, which I'll be using for demonstration purposes. If you don't have one, don't worry. Okay, so this test, you don't need the golf club to check this. I'm going to show you, this will make it a lot easier to see if you're limited or not. What the test is it's called cupping and bowing in golf terms. This would be bowing and this would be cupping. What that really is with your wrist is this is wrist flexion and this is wrist extension. We want to see if you've 60 degrees on each one. What is 60 degrees? If I get my 6-iron again and I rest it on the table, and if I get my wrist and I try and flex here, if I can get my wrist angle to match the angle of the club, I'm clear. I struggle on this a little bit. My wrist doesn't want to flex to the same angle that that club is at, okay? So that would be wrist flexion on my right side. I can then check it with my left side. So here, and try and flex down. Left side is not as much of a problem. Okay, does that make sense? So that would be flexion against a 6-iron. To get the extension, you just turn the 6-iron up the other way. I start with my forearm. Start my forearm here, and then I try and go up, and I want to see if I can get my wrist angle to extend up to match the angle of this sole of the club here. Okay, so that would be extension on the right, and then extension on the left. So that would be here. So I'm just about getting that to match. If you don't have a golf club or you can't set it up like that, it's not that difficult to set up in front here, okay? Take a look at one hand at a time. So if I do right hand, it's pretty easy to tell that this is not at 60 degrees. It's probably closer to 45 maybe. When I go this way, that's no problem. That's nearly at 90. And then if I go on my left side, flexion is trying to get my palms down. So that's probably closer to 60. And then when I go up, that's definitely 60. So my problem on both sides is flexion down this way. You can test both of them. You might feel it in your forearms. All of the wrist ones are very much related to basically what your wrist does tends to be reflected in the club face. To be perfectly honest, I usually don't go near people's wrists because it has too much of a relationship with club face, and it's more of a golf instructor's job. But being able to assess your wrist and tell if your wrist is limited in certain ranges of motion is definitely useful info for your swing and definitely useful info for your golf instructor. If you struggle with the wrist stuff, simple exercises where you're on the ground trying to get your wrists forward one way with your palm or with your back of your hand down, and then with your palms down are simple ways of working on it. Okay, so if you want to grab your sheet and mark those in quickly for wrist flexion is the bowing where you were trying to go down. And then wrist extension is cupping or up. We won't be doing the optional reach, roll, and lift test. That's an outdated test. We use the shoulder flexion one instead, which is much easier to get the shoulder test from. That is the conclusions of the tests. I have one question from somebody to go over the seated trunk rotation again, please, which I will do now. If you want to stay for that, obviously you're more than welcome. If not, thanks a lot for signing up. I really appreciate taking the time to do it. I know it went on for quite a while, but I hope you learned from it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out on the email. What's also something that I tell people a lot is they do an assessment like this and they ask, what does this mean about my program? What should I do for my training based on failing these exercises? Anyone who's familiar with the training programs I have on the app will probably recognize a lot of these exercises in that from doing approximately, I don't know how many hundreds of these assessments with people, definitely over 500, I kept seeing the same patterns over and over again. So I wasn't watching anyone's webcam here, but I can guarantee that most people struggle a little bit with the pelvic tilt. They struggle with the pelvic rotation. They struggle with the overhead deep squat. They struggled with the lower quarter rotation. They struggled with the 90-90 when they went into golf posture. And they were probably, yeah, they'd probably be the main ones. So those exercises and how to improve them is what I use in the mobility and warm-up sections of my programs. So essentially, regardless of what you struggle with, the pre-made programs that I have target the common limitation areas. So if you follow them, in the case of a few, should improve. Okay, the seated trunk rotation for, I think it was Ben that asked, simple, grab your chair, rather than it pointed straight ahead at the screen, rotate it so that one of the legs of the chair is pointed at it. Grab your 3 shafts, it doesn't matter what they are. Go to the side of the chair, put it on one side, cut it across in front, go to the other side, do the same thing so that you have your X or your V, okay? Then you're gonna sit so that your feet are in the middle of that V and your backside is on the edge of the chair. So now when I look down, I have a 45-degree shaft going to each side. I'm gonna sit up nice and tall, get the shaft across my shoulders, and then from here, I'm gonna rotate to my right. When I rotate as far as I can to my right, keeping the shaft on my shoulders, I'm gonna glance to my left. I can even tip a little bit if I need to, so it's easier to see. And what I'm checking is this shaft that's on my shoulders and the shaft that's along the ground this way. Is it less than, equal to, or greater than this shaft? And that will be my backswing or right side. And then I can do the same thing in the other direction, where I turn to my left. After I've turned as far as I can left, I glance to my right. And then I'm seeing, is it less than, which would be about here, equal to, or greater than the shaft that's on the ground. So basically just matching left rotation to the shaft that's on the ground here, right rotation to the shaft that's on the ground here. And you have less than, equal to, or greater than on each side. Right side is when you turn right, left side is when you turn to your left. I hope that clears it up. So on the cervical rotation test, the question was, that's a good question. I know I probably should have come closer to the computer for that. I'm going to do it kneeling here just so you can see. All we're assessing is the rotation of your cervical spine, which is basically your neck, okay? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to get my fingers and I'm going to put them on my collarbone here, okay? I'm going to rotate as far as I can in that direction. That's step 1. Now step 2 is no movement of my shoulders. Keep my mouth closed. And can I get my chin to touch it? What I don't want to do is raise up this shoulder or lean this way, okay? I'm just trying to isolate my neck. Okay, I think that's it, guys. We were just on 90 minutes. I hope you found good value from the sign up. The recording of this session will be sent out to everybody who signed up within 48 hours. Because it's a very long video, it will just take a little bit of time to edit and upload. But as I said, I really appreciate everybody signing up. I hope you learned a little bit about your body and how it might be linking up with your golf swing. And if you've any questions, feel free to send an email to fitforgolf, the digits 18@gmail.com. And in regards to programming to improve it, any of the ones that I have on my app have a specific section of each workout, which works on common limitations in the screen. I might do another one of these in approximately 12 weeks or so that you can get a chance to retest and see if you're after improving a little bit, okay? The main thing I would say is that regardless of where you're starting from now, doing basic mobility stuff quite simply will make a big difference on this. And once you have basic mobility stuff cleared, then it's much, much easier to start doing higher level strength exercises and seeing some clubhead speed and also just consistency with your golf swing. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much. And I hope to hear from you soon. Thank you.